Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Hall-Saladino. I'm the Executive Director at the Fulton County Historical Society in Gloversville, New York. Today we're at the Caroga Historical Museum in Caroga Lake for a very special tour of the Sherman's Arcade building.
Hello, and welcome to the Caroga Historical Museum. Today we're going to take you on a tour of our arcade building. But before we start the tour, I'd like to give you a brief history of why we even have this building here. The year was 1920, and it all started with a dream when Frank Sherman Sr. imagined a destination that would attract visitors. In just 1 year, he and his sons built a bathhouse and a two-story dance hall on the Caroga Lake waterfront. With its opening in 1921, his dream became a reality when large crowds of people began to frequent Sherman's. Big bands played and busloads of people were transported from Albany for a day of summer fun. Gradually, games and rides were added to the park. A carousel, a Ferris wheel, Snap the Whip, and other rides made the park a place for family fun. An arcade building was built that housed pinball machines, bingo machines, a penny machine, many other things that took only a few coins to play. Sherman's was the place to go. Sherman's remained popular through the 50s and 60s, but began to lose out in competition when the theme parks developed at Lake George. Now fast forward to 2003. Our museum hosted an exhibit in our barn of Sherman's memorabilia. We had postcards, pictures, newspaper clippings with memories of Sherman's Park. It was so well attended, with people coming and telling stories and laughing and crying and telling about what Sherman's was all about and what it meant to them, that by the end of the exhibit, we realized we needed to have a permanent exhibit here at the museum property because Sherman's played such an important part in Caroga Lake history. So in 2004, we formed a committee. Tim Mitchell drew up the plans for the building. Janet Sherman Shepherd gave a very generous monetary donation. Grants were received from the Frank Perella Charitable Trust, the Louis D. Morrill Charitable Trust, the Howard S. Argesinger Trust, and Nelson A. Taylor Company. Fundraisers were held, and donations from community residents enabled the building of this arcade in 2005 under the careful supervision of Bob King. It was constructed totally by community volunteers. Janet Sherman Shepherd and Faye Sherman Shepherd donated their father's desk, his ledgers, tools, and many of his inventions. Most of the arcade machines were purchased from John Papa, and he also gave us much signage that had been at Sherman's Park. In 2006, the arcade was open to the public, and once again people came and spent time and told us about their experiences at Sherman's. But as time went on, we noticed our younger crowd came through, and they had no idea about what they were seeing or what it meant. They had never had the experience of the joy of going to Sherman's Park for the day. So in 2013, we turned our arcade into a teaching museum. We closed it down to the public for the entire summer, wrote narratives, and gave narratives and pictures to my daughter, Christiane Smith, who owns Design Smith Studio in Saratoga Springs, and she designed ceiling-to-floor panels. So now you could come and spend some time, know more about the Sherman family, and also about the Sherman dream and the park. In 2014, we had a ribbon-cutting ceremony, and we were fortunate enough to have many of the Sherman family members in attendance, and also some of the former workers from Sherman's Park. Once again, many memories were shared. The museum continues to search for Sherman artifacts, and we like to keep adding to our arcade so that there's something new for people to see as they come to visit. So now you have a little brief history about the background of our museum. So it's time to go inside. Follow me. The first thing you'd see as you enter our arcade is the penny exchange booth. In the original arcade building, the penny exchange was in the center of the building. You needed to change your money into pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters, as that's what you needed to play the many games that were in the arcade. So now we have our fistful of change, and we're ready for our tour, and I have some museum trustees who will help us on the tour.
When people entered the arcade, you often overheard them saying, "Where is she?" So where is she? That question referred to the fortune teller. Although she was scary to many children, others found her rather intriguing. As you can see, housed in her own custom case, it gave her a very special air. The way it worked was, when you inserted your coin in the slot, her crystal ball would light up and her hands moved. The right hand moved back and forth with the index finger pointed at the many cards spanned out in front of her. It moved back and forth, and when the finger finally stopped on the chosen one, out came your fortune printed on a card for you to keep. Many people have fond memories of her reading their fortune.
The bumper car. This car was totally restored by Herb Griffin. It even has front and rear lights. Many people have fond memories of bumping into each other. You could see sparks fly from the ceiling and hear the buzzing and banging as the cars drove around the pavilion. This car, named Skippy, was made by Frank Sherman so he could drive around the park. Skippy has a horn, turn signals, four-way flashing lights, and high and low beams. This would still be fun to drive today. This is Snap the Whip. The restoration of this car was completed by Herb Griffin. This car made quite a racket as it glided along the floor, then would suddenly change direction in a whip-like motion, giving an exhilarating feeling to the riders. It was a popular ride.
The arcade was filled with many coin-operated games. There was an air gun hockey game, a baseball game, a pinball game, Shoot the Bear, and Peppy the Clown, and many more. This kiss-o-meter was one of the favorites of the guys who liked to try to show off for their girlfriends. It would tell how good a kisser they were. For 2 cents, they would know if their girlfriend would go home with them that night or not. Okay, this is a picture of some of the animals that were on the carousel that was added to the park in 1932. The original horses were hand-carved by German carver Charles Loof. Loof's well-proportioned carousel horses and menagerie figures are often described as dynamic, dramatic, exciting, and pleasing. Frank Sherman purchased the carousel from a park in Sylvan Beach, which is near Rome, New York. The carousel had been created in the early 1900s. The original horses were sold after a fire on July 18, 1979. They were replaced with the metal castings of Loof, Parker, and Spillman animals, and they are still on the carousel at Sherman's Park today.
This is Blows It, which is a good example of the genius of Frank Sherman. He designed and built this at a time when most people had never seen a snowblower. And except for a new Wisconsin engine, almost everything else in it came from a junkyard. And I talked to a man who used to operate it. He said it worked very well, as good as anything you could buy. And it's been used a lot. You can tell by looking at it, it's been used a lot. And the only one in the world like it. And we're very happy to have it. Well, the high striker. When I first saw it in the 50s, it was probably fairly new, because in the old picture on the wall, it's a different one. They named it right, high striker, 21.5 feet tall. It took a lot of Cheerios to ring that bell. My father wasn't a very big guy, but he could ring it. His trick was the split second before the mallet hit, he'd bend his knees, and that would increase the downward pressure. There was also tricks to keep a man from winning too much. And one of them was the operator would nonchalantly lean on one of the guy wires and would move things just enough so the man couldn't win. But we cheat. We don't want to swing the mallet in here. So this is what we do now.
Since all the buildings at Sherman's Park at that time and in the surrounding area were constructed of wood, one of Frank Sherman's biggest fears was fire. The park was built before Caroga even had a fire department. So in order to protect his beloved park, Frank decided to design a water pump by adapting an automobile engine to do the job. It was actually the first fire engine in Caroga. It had a very long hose attached to it to be put into the lake to provide water if there ever was fire anywhere in the park. So you might wonder, where did he keep it? The ingenious fire pumper was stored behind the game booths on the midway, of course near the lake. Frank built it to be mobile so it could be moved around quickly to handle any fire emergency in any of the buildings. This pump was capable of putting out over 900 gallons of water per hour. Frank Sherman was such a clever and ingenious man. He truly thought of everything and designed or invented whatever he needed to do the job.
This is the compressor that Frank made. He made his own compressor. Why buy it if you can make it? Next to the compressor, you'll see the weed eater. Long before there were weed eaters, Frank Jr. made his own trimmer using a car leaf spring for the blade. It was made in the 50s and is balanced and easily handled. He said he couldn't cut around his trees, so he made something that did. Behind these inventions, you'll see Frank's desk. It's just as he left it. Original letters and ledgers show his plans. Just imagine the ideas that were born at this desk. Frank was once called the Walt Disney of the North, and you can easily agree when you see all of his inventions. He was a creative genius. Notice the train sets above the desk. They used to be in the arcade. To the right, we have his workbench. You can see pictures of Cadillacs. He owned 33 Cadillacs in his lifetime. He loved cars. He loved anything with a motor.
This poster is dedicated to Trixie the Monkey. Mr. Sherman had him sent up from Florida. He purchased him from a zoo down there. And Trixie was the main attraction right at the entrance to Sherman's when you came in. And I can remember as a little girl, she was my favorite thing, and I always played with her as I came in and fed her. And at the end of the day, Mr. Sherman would take her by her paw, walk her across the road to his home where she stayed in his garage. One morning, walking back to her position, he happened to step on her tail. Well, she didn't think too much of that, so she climbed up his pant leg, grabbed a hold of his tie, shook him really good to let him know that was not a good thing that he did. And after the season was over and Sherman's was coming to a close, he would put Trixie back on the train where she would go back to Florida like a lot of our snowbirds do, and that's where she spent her winters back at the zoo, and they kept her for free for the season.
When I was a kid, my family frequently visited my grandfather's camp on Green Lake. On the way home, it was a ritual to stop at Sherman's Amusement Park to buy a box of Sherman's famous yellow popcorn. It was cool to drive up to the popcorn lady, Janet Sherman, to buy a box for only 10 cents. You could also purchase a bag of peanuts for 15 cents. Our prices have changed somewhat, but I will be here to serve you at any of our special events. Just listen for the call. Get your popcorn here.
This is a Wurlitzer style 125 military band organ. Similar, but probably larger than the one that was on the carousel down there. And if you want to focus in, this is probably more what was on the carousel down there. The Style 125 has been called the workhorse of the industry. They probably made more of these than any other style. They were used in amusement parks, traveling shows, dance halls, roller rinks, and they were produced from about 1900 to about 1922. I think this one is one of the later ones built. And because they were used so widely and for such a long time, most of them earned their keep until they were antiques. This catalog is rolls that are available just for this organ. And some of it's fairly modern music. Most of your larger organs had lots and lots of pipes. This boy makes do with 13 horns and a few pipes and some other things. And in a moment you're going to find out how well he does with his horns. I warn you, it's loud. Most people can't stand it right square in front of him. I found out a few years ago why carousel music is so loud. They were running the carousel at Sherman's and the music stopped. The noises that come out from one of those is so terrible you couldn't get anybody to write it without covering it up. So, are you ready?
So this concludes our brief tour of the arcade building. Next year, we will be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the opening of Sherman's Park. We hope you'll come visit our museum next year, come celebrate, and learn more about the Sherman's dream. We'll be looking for you.